I never believed in fate until the night I asked a stranger to dance, not knowing he was the man who had shattered my heart 5 winters ago. And I certainly never imagined that the wolves who haunted my dreams had been watching over me all along, waiting for me to remember who I truly was. The winter festival arrived with the first heavy snowfall, blanketing our village in a silence so complete that even the ravens seemed reluctant to break it. I stood at the edge of the square, my healing satchel still strapped across my shoulder, because old Marin had needed feverfew for her cough, and I had not had time to return home before the music began. Lanterns hung from every post and doorway, their golden light flickering against the white drifts, and the villagers spun in pairs across the frozen cobblestones while I lingered in the shadows as I always did, watching but never truly part of it all. They called me the wolf woman behind my back, the strange girl who wandered the forest at dawn and returned with frost in her hair and secrets in her eyes. My grandmother had been the same before she passed, and her mother before her, healers who knew the old ways and spoke to the wilderness as though it could answer. The village tolerated us because they needed our remedies for their fevers and their failing hearts and their children's nightmares, but they never truly accepted us. I had learned long ago not to expect warmth from anyone but the fire crackling in my small cabin at the edge of the pines, where the forest breathed its ancient breath through my windows. I wrapped my cloak tighter against the cold, watching couples laugh and spin beneath the lantern glow, their breath rising like prayers into the frozen air, and felt that familiar ache of isolation settle into my bones. Perhaps this year I would leave early, slip back to my cabin before anyone noticed my presence. Perhaps I would brew myself tea from the dried chamomile hanging above my hearth and pretend that the silence did not weigh upon me like stones. I was about to turn away when I saw him across the square. Victor, the son of our mayor, with his proud shoulders and his cruel smile that had haunted too many of my public moments. He had courted me once, years ago, before I made the mistake of refusing him. His pride had never recovered from being rejected by the village outcast, and since then he had made it his personal mission to remind me of my place whenever our paths crossed. Tonight, his gaze found mine through the crowd, sharpening with that familiar malice as he began walking toward me, with the confidence of a man who knew no one would come to my defense. My heart sank into my stomach. I could not endure another public humiliation, another reminder that I was unwanted and unwed and strange. I looked desperately for an escape, calculating whether I could reach the forest path before he intercepted me, and that was when I noticed the man standing near the old well. He was tall, broad in the shoulders, dressed in a dark traveling cloak that spoke of wealth without ostentation. His hair was black as a moonless winter night, and even from a distance I could see the pale scars that traced his jaw and disappeared beneath his collar like memories of old battles. He stood utterly still, watching the dancers with an expression I could not read, and something about him made my breath catch in a way I had not felt in 5 long years. He reminded me of someone I had buried so deep in my memory that even his name had become a wound I refused to touch. Someone whose absence had carved a hollow in my chest that no amount of healing herbs could fill. Victor was nearly upon me. I could see the mocking words forming on his lips, could already feel the shame heating my cheeks as villagers began to turn and watch. Without thinking, without allowing myself to consider the madness of what I was doing, I crossed the square and stopped before the stranger. My voice emerged with a boldness I did not feel. "Dance with me," I said. "My ex is watching." The stranger turned, and his eyes met mine. They were amber, deep and luminous, the color of autumn honey held up to firelight, and they widened almost imperceptibly as he looked at me. For a long moment he said nothing, and I felt suddenly foolish, acutely aware of my worn cloak and my wind-burned cheeks, and the healing herbs still perfuming my clothes with rosemary and sage. Then he extended his hand, and his voice was low and resonant as aged oak. It would be my honor. His palm was warm against mine, warmer than any winter night should allow, And when he drew me into the dance, I felt the world narrow to the space between us. The music swelled, strings and drums weaving together in an old melody my grandmother used to hum while grinding herbs by candlelight, and the stranger moved with a grace that seemed almost inhuman. His hand rested at the small of my back, steadying me, guiding me through steps I had never properly learned, and I realized with a jolt that my heart was racing in a way it had not since I was 18 years old, and hopelessly, devastatingly in love. "You are the healer," he said, not a question, the one who lives at the forest edge, where the pines grow thick and the paths disappear into shadow. I nodded, suddenly unable to find words adequate to the moment. Up close, he was even more striking, his features sharp and aristocratic, those amber eyes holding depths I could not fathom. The scars on his face should have made him fearsome, but instead they gave him an air of ancient sorrow, of battles survived and secrets kept close to a weary heart. "I have heard of you," he continued, and there was something strange in his tone, something almost like reverence. "They say you walk where others fear to tread. They say the wolves do not harm you." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow drifting down around us. The wolves. My wolves. Though I had never spoken of them to anyone, not even to the elderly women who came to me for their remedies. The white wolves who appeared in my dreams and sometimes, on the coldest nights, left tracks outside my door as though guarding me while I slept. "I do not know why," I admitted quietly. "They have never threatened me. If anything, they seem to protect me. I have seen them in the forest, watching from between the trees, and they always vanish before I can approach." The stranger was silent for a long moment, his amber eyes searching my face as though looking for something he had lost. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper, meant for my ears alone. "Perhaps they recognize what you carry within you. Perhaps they have been waiting for you to recognize it as well." Before I could ask what he meant by such cryptic words, Victor appeared at my shoulder. His face was red with drink and wounded pride, and when he spoke, his words dripped with contempt. "Dancing with strangers now, wolf woman. Could you find no one from our own village willing to touch you?" The stranger went very still. His hand tightened almost imperceptibly on mine, and when he turned to face Victor, there was something in his expression that made the mayor's son falter. "I would mind my tongue if I were you," the stranger said quietly, and though his voice remained soft, there was iron beneath it. "You speak to the woman I intend to honor this evening, and I do not take kindly to insults directed at those under my protection." Victor's mouth opened and closed. For the first time since I had known him, I saw genuine fear flicker in his eyes. He muttered something unintelligible and retreated into the crowd, nearly stumbling in his haste, and I stared at the stranger with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "You did not need to do that," I said. "He is not worth your trouble." He looked down at me, and for just a moment, his stern expression softened into something that looked almost like tenderness. "Yes," he said quietly, "I did." We danced until the music faded and the lanterns burned low, until the other villagers had retreated to their warm houses and the square lay empty beneath the falling snow. He told me his name was Kale, that he was traveling through on matters of family business that he could not fully explain, that he would be staying at the old inn near the bridge. I told him of my grandmother's teachings, of the remedies I crafted from forest herbs and moonlit water, of the paths I walked at dawn when the mist rose from the frozen streams. And with each word I spoke, I felt the walls I had built around my broken heart begin to crumble. There was something between us, some invisible thread that pulled tighter with every glance and every accidental touch. I knew it was madness to feel this way about a stranger. I had loved a stranger once before, a man with eyes just like these who had appeared from nowhere and vanished just as suddenly, leaving me with nothing but heartbreak and whispered rumors that followed me still. But Kyle felt different. Kyle felt like coming home after years of wandering. Kyle felt like the answer to a question I had been asking my whole life without knowing the words. When the festival ended and the last lantern guttered out, he walked me to the edge of the forest where my cabin waited, its windows dark. The moon hung low and heavy overhead, casting silver light across the snow and the ancient pines. And as we stood at my door, he lifted his hand and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His fingertips grazed my cheek, warm as summer despite the winter cold. "I have waited a long time to find you again, Alara," he said, and my blood turned to ice in my veins. Again. He had said again. I stepped back, my heart pounding against my ribs. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "We have never met before tonight." Pain flickered across his features, old and deep and bottomless. "We have," he said. 5 winters ago, when you were barely 18. I came to this village seeking something I had lost, and instead I found you. I found you gathering herbs at dawn, singing to yourself, your hair loose around your shoulders, and I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in all my centuries of living. Centuries. The word hung between us like a blade. "I loved you then," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I loved you more than I had ever loved anything in all my long existence, and that was why I had to leave. Because what I am would have put you in danger. Because the hunters were closing in, and I could not bear the thought of them finding you because of me. Every day since then, I have regretted leaving without explanation. The world tilted beneath my feet. I saw it then. Behind his human features, the truth he had hidden so carefully. The amber eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness, brighter than any mortal gaze. The unnatural grace of his movements. The warmth that radiated from his skin even in winter. "You," I breathed, the word escaping me like a prayer. "You are him, the man I loved, the man who left without a word and took my heart with him." He nodded, and I saw the weight of years pressing down upon his shoulders. "I am him, and I am more. I am the Alpha King, Alara. I rule the white wolves of the sacred forest, and I am a shapeshifter who has walked this world for longer than your village has existed. I should have run. Instead, I stood frozen, memories cascading through me like meltwater. The way he had moved, even then. The way the wolves had begun appearing in my dreams only after he left. The way my heart had never stopped aching, as though some part of me had always known he would return. "Why now?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why come back now, after all these years of silence?" "Because the hunters have grown bold again," he said. "They seek the sacred caves where my kind have sheltered for generations, where the old magic still breathes in the stone. And because there is something within you, something that has been awakening since your grandmother passed. Your bloodline carries the gift of the forest guardians, Alara. Your ancestors made a pact with mine long before this village was built, long before humans forgot the old ways. You are meant to stand between my world and yours, to protect both from those who would destroy what they do not understand." I thought of my grandmother in her final days, gripping my hand with surprising strength, her eyes clear despite the fever. "Remember the wolves," she had whispered. "Remember who you are. When he returns, do not run. Do not be afraid." She knew, I realized, tears pricking at my eyes. She always knew. Kale reached for me, then hesitated. "I have never stopped watching over you," he said. "Even when I could not be with you, my wolves guarded your door. They have loved you as I have loved you, from afar, asking nothing in return." Tears blurred my vision. All those years of loneliness, of believing myself abandoned, and he had been there all along, hidden in the shadows of the forest I called home. I closed the distance between us and pressed my palm against his chest. Beneath my fingers, his heart beat strong and fast, thrumming with power I was only beginning to comprehend. I felt something stir within me in response, some dormant spark that had waited all my life for this moment. "Show me," I whispered fiercely. "Show me what I am meant to be." He took my hand and led me into the forest. The snow fell soft and silent around us, each flake a tiny benediction, and as we walked deeper into the pines, I became aware of shapes moving through the trees. White wolves, their eyes gleaming amber in the darkness, their fur luminous as moonlight, fell into step beside us like an honor guard. I felt no fear. I felt only recognition, as though greeting old friends I had forgotten. We climbed for what felt like hours, ascending ridges I had never dared to explore, until at last we reached the entrance to a cave that yawned black and ancient against the mountainside. Runes were carved into the stone around it, symbols that seemed to glow faintly with their own inner light, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. As I stepped across the threshold, the air changed, growing warm and heavy with the scent of pine and something older, something sacred. The wolves remained outside, sitting in a silent circle at the cave mouth, their amber eyes watching with reverent patience. The cave opened into a vast chamber lit by phosphorescent moss that clung to the walls like scattered stars. In the center stood a stone altar, worn smooth by countless hands over countless years, and upon it rested a pendant of white crystal that pulsed with the same light as the runes outside. "This belonged to your grandmother," Kale said softly, "and her mother before her, stretching back to the first woman who stood with the first Alpha and swore to protect the balance between worlds. It has been waiting for you, Alara. It has always been waiting for you." I approached the altar, my heart pounding in my ears like drums. When I lifted the pendant, warmth flooded through me like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, and with it came visions. I saw my grandmother as a young woman standing in this very cave with a great white wolf at her side. I saw her mother before her, an unbroken chain of guardians stretching back through centuries. I saw the hunters with torches and iron traps, and I saw my ancestors standing against them, wielding powers I had never known existed. And I saw Kale. I saw him as a wolf, magnificent and terrible, his fur silver white under the moon. I saw him as a man, young and unscarred, falling in love with a healer's daughter in a village that no longer remembered its own history. I saw him leaving, tears streaming down his face, not because he did not love me, but because he loved me too much. The visions faded, and I stood trembling in the sacred chamber, the pendant warm against my palm. "I understand now," I said. "I understand why you left. I understand what I am meant to do." Kale stepped closer, cupping my face in his hands. "Will you stand with me?" he asked, his amber eyes shining with hope. "Will you be what you were born to be?" Before I could answer, a howl split the night. Not the pack's song, but a cry of warning, sharp and urgent. Kale's expression hardened into something fierce and ancient. "The hunters," he said. "They have found us." We raced from the cave, wolves streaming around us like living shadows. Below, torchlight flickered through the trees, and I could hear men shouting and hounds baying. Fear clenched my heart, but beneath it burned something stronger. Rage at those who would destroy what they could not understand. Purpose flooding through my veins like liquid fire. The awakened power of my bloodline singing through every fiber of my being. Kyle stood at the ridge's edge, his cloak billowing in the bitter wind. "I will not let them reach the caves. The sacred places must be protected." "Not alone," I replied, and I clasped the pendant around my neck. The crystal flared with brilliant light. Suddenly, I could feel everything. The heartbeat of the forest, ancient and steady, the breath of the wind, the silent communication of the wolves as they circled the hunters. I raised my hands, and words I had never consciously learned spilled from my lips, ancient words of binding and protection that my grandmother must have whispered to me in dreams. The snow rose at my command, swirling into a wall of white that blocked the hunters' path. I heard their cries of terror as the wind drove them back, as wolves howled unseen from every direction. They were not harmed, but they were afraid. And fear was enough. One by one they retreated, torches guttering, hounds whimpering. I held the storm until the last of them vanished into the valley below, until the forest was silent once more. Then my strength gave out, and I collapsed into Kale's waiting arms. I woke in my own cabin, wrapped in furs, the fire crackling merrily in the hearth. Morning light streamed through the frost-laced window, and for a moment I wondered if it had all been a dream. Then I felt the weight of the pendant against my chest, warm and real. Kale sat beside my bed, watching me with those amber eyes that no longer seemed strange but achingly familiar. "The hunters will not return," he said gently. "Word will spread, and even the boldest will think twice before entering these mountains again. The sacred caves are safe." I sat up slowly, my body aching but my spirit strangely light and free. "And the village? What will they say?" "They will say what they have always said," he replied with a faint smile, "that the wolf woman is strange and dangerous and best left alone. But perhaps now they will also say she is to be respected." I laughed, surprised by the sound of my own joy. It had been so long since I had felt anything but lonely and incomplete. Now, with the truth of my heritage blazing within me and the man I had never stopped loving at my side, I felt whole in a way I had never imagined possible. "What happens now?" I asked. Kyle took my hand, threading his fingers through mine. "Now," he said, "we do what our ancestors did. We guard the sacred places. We protect the balance between worlds. We walk between the realm of wolves and the realm of men and ensure that neither destroys the other." He paused, and his expression grew tender. "And we do not walk alone anymore. We walk together, as it was always meant to be. If you will have me, Alara." I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his, and in that kiss was every answer I had ever needed to give. He tasted of winter wind and ancient magic, of promises kept across impossible years, and when we finally drew apart, I saw my own future reflected in his amber eyes. "I will," I said. "I will walk with you, run with you, stand with you against whatever darkness comes. I am the guardian of this forest, and you are my Alpha King, and together we will protect everything we love." Outside, the white wolves sang, their voices rising in a chorus of celebration that echoed across the snow-laden peaks. I stepped onto my porch with Kale beside me, the pendant glowing softly at my throat, and watched as the pack emerged from the trees to greet us. The smaller female approached first, her amber eyes bright with intelligence and warmth. She pressed her muzzle against my palm, and I felt her acceptance wash over me like a blessing. I was one of them now. I had always been one of them, even when I did not know it. The villagers would whisper, the hunters would remember, and somewhere out there, other threats would rise. Other challenges would test the boundaries between worlds. But I was no longer afraid. I was no longer alone. I was Alara, guardian of the sacred forest, beloved of the Alpha King, and my story, our story, was only just beginning. As the sun rose higher over the mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose and pearl, I took Kale's hand and walked with him into the trees. The wolves padded silently beside us, and the forest welcomed us home with whispered blessings in the language of wind and pine. This was my destiny. This was my love. This was the ending I had waited my whole life to find, and it was more beautiful than any dream I had ever dared to dream.